Well, welcome to this edition of Actually Olympia, the podcast. If you've always wanted to know what's going on at the legislature and what's on our minds in terms of the next legislative session, this is the podcast for you because we're going to talk about those things today. So welcome, everybody. I'm Jay Burney, the city manager, and with me, as always, is
Stacey Ray, assistant city manager. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Stacey. And we've got a guest with us today. I'd like everyone to welcome Kyla Shkerich Blair. She is our lobbyist, and she works for Capital Path.
Yep.
And is our contract lobbyist for the city's lobbying duties during the legislative session. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Glad to be here.
So one of the things as we get started, this is something I do all the time, is for people just to get to know our guests a little bit, is we also talk about what people's origin stories are. Like, how did you get where you are doing what you do? So take us back as far as you want to go,
Okay.
and then bring us forward to now to kind of talk about your journey to working in the world of being a lobbyist.
Sure. I am going to guess not very many people are like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be a lobbyist.
Right.
And that is also me. I did not say that. When I graduated high school, I was like, for sure, I'm going to be a physical therapist. That's what I wanted to do. That was my hopes and dreams of where I wanted to go when I went to college. And just like any good college student, I changed my major probably 5 or 6 times, graduated having no idea what I was going to do. So I interned on a couple of political campaigns. One of them was Greg Nichols, who was running for re-election for the mayor of Seattle, and we all know how that turned out. So was super effective there in my internship. Working on those campaigns, had a lot of fun, learned a lot, kind of started to see the role of advocacy through that lens. And then over time, worked for a political consultant who ran primarily legislator races. So when a legislator wants to campaign, they hire a campaign consultant, and that's who I worked for. At that time, a young aspiring legislator named Representative Mia Gregerson wanted to be appointed. So we worked on her appointment process, and then eventually she asked me to come and be a legislative assistant to her when she went to go work in Olympia. And it was during that time that was sort of my first step into government service.
Yeah.
So really started to see the role of advocacy in a different way outside of campaigning. And so I worked closely with her on how to advocate for her legislation, and neither of us had been to Olympia outside of when you go in 8th grade. Your
right.
8th grade field trip, right? To Olympia.
When you argue in front of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And outside of Schoolhouse Rock, we were both kind of like, okay, here we go. Let's figure this out. So her and I really figured out the legislative process, figured out who the key players were that she needed to meet with to get her legislation through. And I saw that side of advocating. And then from there, I also saw, I had a lot of interactions with constituents who were calling us and telling us these issues that they were having. And I would report them back to Representative Gregerson, and she was like, great, let's run a bill. Let's see if we can figure this out. So it was a different side of advocacy that really interests me and kind of sparked, I would say, a bit of a passion in me.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, this is really cool. Worked with Mia for 2 sessions, and then went to the Seattle Metro Chamber where I did small business engagement. So working with small businesses across the city on how to advocate for themselves at City Hall. So obviously, you guys know this.
Yep.
City councils make a lot of policy decisions and legislative decisions that will impact your small businesses, and your small businesses should have a voice at the table. And so we worked with small businesses in Seattle to show them the council process and ensure that they had a voice at the table. So did a lot of advocacy work that way, writing testimony, showing them how to meet with their city council members, walking them through different policy concerns and whatnot. From there, Jenny Durkin was running for mayor, so I introduced her to a handful of small businesses and made sure that they were meeting with the candidates that were running for mayor at the time, and Jenny Durkin is one of them. Jenny Durkin ended up winning, and then asked me to come in as her business, as her business liaison.
Yeah.
So basically doing the work that I was doing in the private sector back in the public sector and making sure small businesses had a voice at the table
Yeah.
when they usually did not. So we stood up her Small Business Advisory Council, which was a group of probably 20 small businesses across the city, different ranges, different business types, etc. And whenever she had policy decisions she was going to make, she would run it past them. Whenever we had our agencies come in and meet with them and hear feedback from the small businesses to the departments, and so the departments could make changes. So again, back to the advocacy piece. This was truly some advocacy that was happening in these conversations because it was the small business owners being able to meet directly with the mayor and with department directors about their concerns and influence policy. I left Durkin's office and went to Senator Murray's office, where I did a similar work. We had outreach directors all over the state.
Yep.
And what we did there was we took the concerns of constituents all over the state and then brought them back to D.C. so that any policy we might be able to influence in D.C., they were hearing about from folks in Washington state. So we know federal policy is usually broad and large, but our hope is the work there was to have Washington voices impact legislation in D.C. So again, back to the advocacy piece. After Patty Murray's office, I went and worked at the Department of Commerce, where I was their chief of staff for a couple of years. And that's, again, where you saw advocacy really pushing towards what programs were being implemented at the state. Because the Department of Commerce is really one of the few agencies that gives money directly into the community hands. So they fund a lot of nonprofits. They have a ton of grant programs that are going just directly on boots on the ground in the communities. And so that's really where you could see a bunch of programs that the community was influencing at the time. And how we were implementing those programs was, again, another form of advocacy. So when I stepped out of the public sector and said, okay, what's next? I wanted to be able to lift up the voices that traditionally haven't had a seat at the table, and make sure we're working closely with legislators on what those needs are. And if we can impact policy, great. If we can impact funding requests, great.
Yep.
And that's essentially what I do today as a lobbyist. So I would say lobbyists get a bad rap for being kind of the traditional, what folks think of lobbyists. But I would say what my goal is as a lobbyist is to be an advocate for voices that might not have the ability to be at the table or can't always be at the table or haven't had the opportunity to be at the table yet.
Yeah. Well, you've had such a wide range of experiences along the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I think is really cool about your journey to being a lobbyist is you can relate to lots of different people at lots of different levels and lots of different electeds at lots of different levels because you've worked alongside all of them.
Yeah. And it's been interesting to see. There's a lot of similarities, and then there's also a lot of differences when you get to the varying levels of government. I would say the state government is probably my favorite place to be.
Sure.
Just local was fun, but you get a lot. It's a lot of different issues. The state's good. It's a lot of different issues. Federal is a little slow.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Well, you started working us into our next question is really talk more about what a legislative liaison or a lobbyist does and why is lobbying really important to this whole process?
Yeah. So a lobbyist, they do a handful of things. So we make connections for folks. So building relationships for folks who might not have them. We problem solve. So if you bring a problem to our attention, we will go and look through different policy. We'll look through different executive orders. Where is that problem coming from? Is it how a state agency maybe is implementing a program, and is that legislatively that they have to implement that program, or is that by the choice of the state agency on how they're implementing? And then they also help dissect information. So during the legislative session in particular, thousands of bills are introduced and you have to go through those, and you all are incredibly busy people and dealing with your own things going on, that we look through those bills and we're able to pull out ones where we say, hey, this might be of interest to the city of Olympia. Here's a summary of it. And then we decide what position we might want to take on it, if any position,
Yeah.
or what the concerns might be, or where we might be able to support. So I see a lobbyist's role as helping to build relationships, helping to make the right contacts. I don't want to go into a room and be the one that's speaking. I'll make sure that my clients are in the right rooms, meeting with the right people, but it's really their stories that are the most impactful. So making sure we're making those connections for folks and making sure they're getting into the right rooms. I know we always want to meet with our local legislators, and that's, of course, we're always going to do them. We're always going to build those relationships. But outside of local, who else should we be talking to about things that we're working on or things that we're focused on, and making sure that you're meeting with the right agency directors, the right legislators, and the right folks to make those changes.
Well, one of the things you said is, which always hits me is thousands of bills get dropped, right? Not all of them make it across the finish line, but one of the things that's really important to us, although you're there really working on our priorities, you also know when a bill hits that maybe is counter to our priorities, and maybe we didn't even know it was coming, hadn't thought about it. So if we were just moving along on our own without you, and we were just kind of moving our own priorities and not paying attention to the larger landscape, we could get hit with something that we didn't see coming, that actually we didn't lobby for or against it because we didn't know. So I really appreciate that piece of intel that you all bring to this whole equation for us, is just that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the millionaire's tax is a perfect example where the millionaire's tax is great because it's going to bring a different source of revenue into our state. But then you have this other piece where they did sales tax exemptions. Again, great. Like, we want to take prices or we want to lower prices for constituents, but that inadvertently can impact cities and the city's bottom line. And that's something where once we made that connection, we were able to tell legislators, hey, this is going to be a problem for local governments and their budgets are already tight. What are we going to do to help support them? And they were able to put some money aside for cities.
Newsflash, it's not enough.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that next
Exactly.
session.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That'll be something we'll work on next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you hit on a number of reasons why we sought your support for our city. I mean, one of those you just mentioned, which is just that we're dealing with, lots of our own issues every day, and running and managing a city. And we needed some added support, along with your expertise to be able to kind of talk about some of our priorities at the state level. Can you talk a little bit about, what are some of the reasons that you found that communities have reached out to you and wanted your support?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is time. Everyone's so busy, and again, we've acknowledged that you all have your own things going on, and it's hard to keep track of things. I would also say you guys are really lucky to be in the state capitol, right? So you can go and up to the capitol and testify if you need to, but a lot of folks aren't nearby and can't make the trek over here to go and advocate for themselves. And so we work with a lot of small municipalities in central and eastern Washington who don't have the resources to come over here. They're all doing jobs, and we can connect them to their legislators. We can help advocate for them with different legislators, and we can help them testify in hearings remotely, if that's necessary for what they want to accomplish. So a lot of it's I think time and resources on whether or not folks can come over, and having somebody here all the time. I mean, myself and my colleague Daniel, who we work with, we're in Olympia at the state capitol every day. So we're always there. And so we can always ping legislators when somebody needs something. We can listen to what's going on and flag things really quickly for folks. And that's not something that you all can do with the jobs that you have. I would say the other thing is just how complex things are. There's a lot of funding opportunities at the state, but in order to get access to those funding opportunities, you need to know how to access them.
Yeah.
And so making sure that that folks know they can fill out a capital budget request form, and what does that look like, and how much money can they ask for, and what's realistic to ask for, and what can they spend that on. That's stuff that we can walk folks through, and we can help we can help them write their request form so that they don't have to do that if they don't have time or capacity to do that. We can help them write their testimonies. We can do all these things to make it as easy as possible to allow them to advocate for themselves at the Capitol. And that's, so I think that's a lot of reasons why folks reach out to us. It's just government's complicated. There's not a ton of time when you have other jobs, and we're here every day and can help walk through the systems with them.
Yeah.
What do you find most rewarding, or do you have a favorite moment of your time being a lobbyist where you're like, hey, this was a really awesome thing that we were able to accomplish?
Yeah. So we do a lot of funding, I would say. So we've been able to secure, I think in the last 2 years, probably $60 million in state funding.
That's awesome.
For clients just around the state. And it's everything from a housing provider being able to purchase the building that they currently are leasing and have residents in, and they're immigrant and refugee residents who are trying to start a new life here in Washington, to helping support infants who were exposed to opioids in the womb, and both their, obviously the infant needs help recovering, but then so does the parent, and how do we keep the parent and the infant together to support the recovery of the parent? That's another program that we've been able to get funding for and keep their doors open.
I love that.
And then to small rural cities who their infrastructure is incredibly outdated because they don't have the resources to build new infrastructure. And so not the most exciting thing, but money for a wastewater treatment plant can really save a community when needed. And so we've been able to do things like that. And that's always rewarding, of course, because it's very tangible. It's like,
you can see
I
it.
got you $3 million. This is great. But I would say one thing we worked on in particular is we work with a rural hospital in Eastern Washington who was at risk of closing their doors. And one thing we were able to identify was they could become, the federal government approved Washington State to be able to put a new hospital designation into their system, so they can become rural emergency hospitals, which essentially means if there is a car accident on the freeway, they can stabilize the people and then get the people transported to a different hospital, larger hospital, where they can care for their needs. This designation was not accepted, and HCA had not adopted it yet and had not applied yet to get that designation. We were able to work bipartisanly to pass a bill to get that designation approved, and now rural hospitals can access that to keep their doors open. And that gives them extra federal funding that keeps their doors open in rural areas, so that if there's an emergency in, say, Ritzville, Washington, whether it be one of the community members has a heart attack or there's an accident on 990, there is that hospital that's a more central location. Get them stabilized and then get them off to Spokane where they can be cared for appropriately. So
awesome.
That was one that was good because it helps a lot of folks in the state.
All right.
Yeah. I'm curious, I want to ask a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Because you talked a little bit earlier about, advocating or bringing the voices and stories of communities to the legislature. But I also imagine that legislators are asking or want those stories too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing we see a lot is, especially with some of our local governments that are in Eastern Washington, when you bring those folks out to Olympia and have them meet with their legislators that they always see at home.
Yeah.
In Olympia, and not every legislator, especially the Eastern Central Washington ones, they don't go back very often, so they're not going back home every weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, some do and some don't. And so when they see folks from their hometowns come in and wanting to talk to them, their faces just light up, and it's almost like they miss home. Like, it's kind of nice,
I could see that.
Yeah,
I could see that.
And so that's something that they love, and we try to make sure to make those about connections, right? Make sure we make those connection points for people. But I would say as a whole, legislators want to hear from people. They want to hear what's going to help if their bill is going to help the community, if it's going to hurt community, where are the problem points, where are the pain points, how do we fix those? Can we make these minor adjustments? So I would just tell folks to never hesitate to reach out because your stories are so important and legislators want those stories too.
Oh, bills get written because people advocate.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, that's exactly how it should work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if your voice isn't part of a process, if our voice isn't part of a process, then it's hard to complain about what happens, right? If you're not active. So
yeah, exactly. I think that's another point too, is just making sure that you're involved in the process. Because if you aren't, then you can't make an impact.
You can't make an impact.
Yeah. So you mentioned Daniel. So you have a team member that
do.
is also working with us.
I do.
So do you want to just take a minute to introduce Daniel's role and kind of maybe how the two of you work together?
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel Palethorpe, I think was born and raised in Olympia. He has lived here
A long time.
most of his life. So he is a true Olympian guy. Which is great. So he and I first met when he was working at Patty Murray's office, and I promise it's not a requirement to work at Patty Murray's office and work for
It's kind of a theme
firm, but it is
for us at the state and federal level.
It is a theme, I will say, but definitely not a requirement.
Yeah.
But he and I worked together in Senator Murray's office a few years ago, and I asked him to come over and help on state stuff. He's worked on state work and state legislative races all over the state, but legislative races, and just has a breadth of knowledge and different relationships. Going back to relationships, there's 148 legislators, and it's hard to know all of them. And hard to build relationships with every single one of them. So we both bring different relationships to the table, which can be hugely helpful when we're trying to lobby for something or figure out where an issue might be. So between the two of us, we have a pretty good breadth of the legislature. And I would say the other thing with Daniel is he's probably slightly more of a policy wonk than I am. So he likes to really get into the weeds of policy and summarize them. And that's hugely helpful too, as we're navigating complex legislation. So
yeah, it's been great to have you both, as a team working with us. I mean, obviously, I've gotten to know you, and I knew Daniel from his time in Senator Murray's office, and worked with him and gotten to know him over the years as well. So I think it's been great to have you guys as a team.
Yeah, it's been fun, and he's a good partner. So,
which kind of brings us to, we put out an RFP a couple of years ago looking for a lobbyist.
Yes.
You saw it.
I did.
You all responded. What drew you to us?
I was incredibly interested with how the city of Olympia handles being the capital city, because I think what you all have with the state capitol in your front yard, in your yard, how do you deal with that, the complexities of legislative session and having legislators here and the funding opportunities and whatnot? I think it's obviously a very different space than most cities or any city are in.
Yeah,
and
it's true.
Another interesting dynamic is the fact that legislators become your constituents for 3 or 4 months out of the year, and you
that's also
become
true.
Their constituents for 3 or 4 months.
Sometimes
out
they
of
call
the
us.
Year. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I thought it would be incredibly interesting to see what that dynamic and relationship would be like, and doing that work. But also, I think you guys are doing incredible things with your housing work and the work that's going on with the utilities and the water treatment facilities and all of that stuff. So I think you guys are very progressive in your policies and the work that you're doing, and making changes for cities. And I thought that would be interesting to work on. Exciting.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of good success with you already in the first session, and we're already looking forward to session number 2.
Yeah.
Coming up.
It's coming up fast.
I know.
Yeah.
So you did just come on board right before the last session. Yeah. So
last November, maybe?
Yeah. Right towards the end of the year. And then we're right in it. And you did a fantastic job, by the way, of getting
Thank
up
you.
to speed and getting going.
It was fun.
But I'm curious, maybe had you had more time, but no, like, what does it look like to approach a new community that you're working with?
Yeah.
And Olympia too. I mean, what are some of the things
Yeah.
you're curious about, you need to know, you want to know?
What could we have done better?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let us have it.
No,
Yeah.
you guys were great. So our approach with new clients is really listening. I mean, you all are the experts of your communities and your cities, and the things that we need to focus on are going to come from you all directing us. And we're going to tell you, hey, this is the right path forward, and here's how you can accomplish these things. But in terms of like the issue areas and the things that you're concerned about, those are all going to come from you. So a lot of meeting with the executive team, meeting with the council members, meeting with you all, and hearing what are the needs that we can focus on for the legislative session. That's how we always approach everything. So we come in a listening role and then figure out what problems can we solve in a short session, what problems can we solve in a long session,
Yep.
what are things that we're going to need to do over time, because not everything can be done in one session. And sometimes it's going to take incremental change, and everyone hates that, but that's the reality.
It is a reality.
Of progress is incrementally. So we sit there and listen and identify, okay, what can we do in these different buckets, and then work with you all to create your priorities around that, and figure out, okay, make sure we're going to figure out what a good budget request would be, either in transportation or capital. Right now, operating is not a thing,
Right.
but eventually we'll work on that. But there are still things we can advocate for, and what do those look like, and how do we do that? So with every client, we listen, and then we identify different things we can do in different amounts of time, and then the strategy around that. So what are we going to do every interim going forward to make sure that we get the big things we couldn't do in a short session? How do we get those accomplished, and make sure that we're doing those things during every session and after every session?
Good.
Can you expand a little bit more about, we have different types of asks as other communities do.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times it might be a budget ask. Like,
Yeah.
we just need money to build this thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's a policy ask. Like,
Yeah.
we need the ability to do this thing for our community. Can you talk a little bit about the difference and kind of how you work within both areas?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say the funding requests are fairly straightforward. It's obviously we need money for something. And so we will work with our clients to figure out, is this in the transportation budget? Is it in the operating budget, which obviously the operating budget's tight right now, or is it in the capital budget? Okay, if it's in the capital budget and transportation budget, then we figure out what's an appropriate dollar amount to ask for. Coming in and asking for $20-30 million is maybe not the best play when it's a capital budget request. But figuring out what is an appropriate dollar amount, and then starting to set up tours, both with your local legislators, because your local legislators are going to be the folks that have to sponsor your requests. But then you're going to want to call the committee members, and you're going to want to meet with folks sitting on the committee. And ideally, if you can get meetings with the chair of the budget committees, that's great, because then they've heard your project, they've seen your project, maybe you've had them on a tour of your project.
Yeah.
That's really great. And so those are fairly straightforward. Then you have to apply, and there's that kind of stuff. But with policy, it's a little bit more complicated, because you're changing a piece of policy, right? And so you'll go in and meet with your local legislator and say, this is the issue that I'm having. And they'll say, okay, I think we can do this. And they may ask you, can you go meet with the committee chair, please, and talk to them about this and tell your story to the committee chair? We would advise you all to do that anyway.
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes the legislator will ask you to do that so that they can help advocate for it through the committee chair. So they then will go and work with local staff or nonpartisan staff and ask them to either work with you, or they'll draft a policy and then send it to the legislator, and the legislator may send it to you and say, okay, is this care for the needs that you're looking for, etc. But then the same playbook is you have the policy, you go and make sure all of your locals are okay with it and going to support it. And then you go and you start to meet with whatever committee that piece of policy is going to. You're going to meet with the chair, you're going to meet with the vice chair, you're going to meet with the ranking members, and you're going to talk to them about why this policy is so important to you and your community and how it could benefit other communities. So I think those are they're similar approaches, but slightly different.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, before we talk about the session that will be, let's talk a little bit about the session that was.
Yeah.
So recap 2026 for us, and we can kind of do this work together, but
Okay.
talk about kind of some successes, both at the state level, kind of their struggles
Yeah.
at the state level, and then kind of where we had some success and the things we were asking for. And that'll help probably set the stage for, as you've already mentioned, it's going to be another tough probably session.
Yeah. So 2026 was a short session. So that means that it was a supplemental year. So they were not writing a new budget. They were just balancing the current budget. And when we went into that session, I don't know that anyone thought progressive revenue was going to be a thing that would pass or come to fruition, only because they only had so many months to do the work. But lo and behold, they were able to pass the millionaire's tax. So that was really the big thing that the session focused on. It was how do we get a different stream of revenue into the state for funding. So they passed the millionaire's tax. That won't be collected for until 2028, and so you won't start to see revenue until 2029, I believe.
Yeah.
So that will take a while to get up and running, which we'll talk about our budget challenges for next year.
Yeah. Because it doesn't help them for next year.
No, it does not help them for next year. So they're still going to be in a very tight spot. But outside of millionaire's tax, which I think took most of the spotlight last session, there were some pretty big housing policies that were passed in terms of allowing for more emergency shelters and housing in different zones in counties and cities. There was also some more funding flexibility for cities to be able to go out and ask for more funding from their constituents to help support housing priorities, and I believe also support systems for children and families as well. One big win was the Deschutes Estuary got all of their capital budget requests.
It was a big one. Gets them all the way to final design.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative Parsley.
Yes.
For her work on that as Vice Chair of Capital, as well as all the other legislators that worked on it. And then I think we mentioned this a little bit, but within the millionaire's tax, there was a spending plan that was created, and part of what they did was the sales tax exemptions, and then they were able to backfill, again, not enough, but able to backfill some of the budget shortfalls that would come from that for cities, taking away a revenue system for cities. So the acknowledgement that needed to be addressed was there, and again, that was something that we had to work on, sort of like Hail Mary last throws of session, but made sure the spend plan included some support for local governments as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. And then I mentioned earlier, but our work this next session is how they allocate, in the future, that money that was set aside, and whether it's enough or not enough, and there probably needs to be some analysis of kind of city impacts that are going to need to be done to kind of truth that number. Yeah, and I legislators have acknowledged that and said that's something that we need to work on in the coming years as we start to understand the impacts of those sales tax exemptions for local governments and whatnot. So it'll definitely be something that we're working on with you all and with them going forward. Well, and you also help, send the message for us around the encampment resolution program. So for those that are listening, the encampment resolution program or the state right-of-way funds, it's the pot of money that comes to us through commerce that helps support the supportive housing projects that we've stood up to address homelessness in our communities here in Thurston County. And the good news is they maintained the funding for us. But there's more work to do
Yep.
because it's kind of hard to go biennium by biennium, wondering if that money's going to be there.
Yeah.
So I think, really that's our work as we think forward is, gratitude for holding on to it.
Yep.
Although it shrank. I got to put that out there.
Yep.
It wasn't as much as we got the biennium before, but we've got more work to do there, but just some gratitude for that, because without it, I don't know how we continue to stand up those sites.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll see what happens this session. I do believe legislators will continue to make it a priority and keep pushing for it. But you're right. It's really hard when that kind of funding is biennium by biennium, year by year, and you have to go back every year and advocate. It makes it difficult.
Yeah.
At best.
Yeah. We have a lot of needs, and you're trying to work through multiple priorities that we have. I mean, really, it's for us. I think as we look into 2027, even our needs are going to be very similar to where they were last year.
Yeah.
Housing, homelessness,
Yep.
they continue to be a priority for us. Revenues, we have declining revenues, and they're all regressive, and we can't keep adding on sales tax.
Yep.
It's we're at 10% in Olympia now.
Yeah.
Right. When you add
It's a
up,
reality.
it's the reality of things. We cannot keep hitting sales tax, so
Yeah.
we need other alternatives. So revenue is going to be on our list somewhere.
Yep.
And then continue to support the estuary as it makes its way through final design.
Yeah.
And then to get us to construction. So that's going to take a big lift. But
Yeah.
how do you work and juggle multiple priorities and multiple clients and making sure that all of our needs are getting met?
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing I have Daniel because he is a lifesaver. But really, what we do is we'll work with you all now. We're starting the process now on building a legislative agenda for the city. And we'll do this with all of our clients and figuring out where are the key priorities that you want to focus on. And then again, in our listening sessions, we'll peel off like, okay, they care about fire districts or they care about public facility districts.
Yeah.
Which, another one from 2026.
Yeah, we do care about that. Yeah.
We'll peel off probably 3 or 4 priorities, and then we'll also make a list that's sort of back of the napkin, if you will, of just other things to stay focused on that folks care about. And so we'll make sure as we're reading through bills and as we're looking through everything that's introduced that session, if there's something that comes up in those buckets, we make sure to flag them for you all immediately so that we can say, is this something you support? Is there something we should be concerned about? How is this going to impact the city or anybody else? So it's a lot of tracking, it's a lot of reading, but it's also a lot of work for you guys when we call and say, hey, this is happening. Let us know what you need us to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, we try really hard to take an individualized approach with everyone. So it's not a one size fits all model because that's just not how this can work.
Yep.
And making sure that we're peeling off those individual needs for folks and tracking them takes a lot of time, but I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
In the end. Yeah.
At the same time, Kyla, do you see like shared priorities amongst?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there must be some general issues that cities are all really struggling with right now.
Yeah, I would say a lot of there's some regulatory burden that's coming from the state that's costing cities money. Folks hate the term unfunded mandates, but that's
I don't like them.
Don't like unfunded
I don't like
mandates.
them.
Yeah. I mean, and it's across the board. It's cities, it's schools, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Counties are dealing with it too. So I would say that's a theme no matter if you're on the west side and the east side, central Washington. I mean, everyone is feeling the pain points of that and how do they keep up with the mandates that are coming from the state that they need to fund. So I do think that will be added into conversations this year. The other thing is that all cities rely on large, small, rural, urban is your public works account. And that's a fund that a lot of folks utilize. A lot of our infrastructure is becoming outdated. We're just at this sort of time in history where a lot of infrastructure that worked for many years is no longer working, or the communities are growing so much that the infrastructure can't handle the growth and handle the use. And so having an account where cities can either get a grant or a loan in order to support some of those projects is critical to their success. And that account keeps getting tapped for different things.
It
and
sure does.
Yep. And that's a pain point for cities everywhere, and rightfully so.
Well, and homelessness is
Yep.
is affecting every city up and down I-5 and
Yep.
across the state, east side, west side. And we'll talk more about that in a minute when we start talking about our 2027 priorities. But
Yep.
that is another item that I've sat on the AWC Legislative Priorities Committee, and it's probably a conversation point every single year from every elected official and every appointed official who sits on that committee to address it.
Yeah, housing and homelessness is something just across the board that everyone deals with, to your point. And then also to your point, being able to raise another sales tax to go towards that, okay, great, but the communities can't sustain that, and that's not sustainable, and it's not fair for cities to have to go back to their communities and ask for more money. So how do we think through what are some realistic funding opportunities for cities who are dealing with homelessness?
Mm-hmm. So, Kyla, we're going to be working with you this year to put ourselves in the best position possible to be able to, advocate, talk about our needs. So what does that period look like in between sessions?
Yeah.
What do you want us to be focused on or getting ready for?
Yeah. So I think a big misconception is that advocacy happens when legislators are here in Olympia and working on bills. And I think that's a huge misconception, because that's not, by the time they come to Olympia, they should, they have their bills, they have their priorities. Of course, stuff comes up that they're going to quickly work on. But by the time they come to Olympia, they're ready to roll. And so advocating in the interim is a key to success with legislators. We should be having conversations now with legislators. We're working on that. Having conversations now with our legislators to let them know, here are some things we're dealing with. Here's what we're thinking our priorities might be next session. What are you working on? What do you think your priorities are? Where can we partner? Can we provide some feedback into that idea to make sure that while they're preparing for next session, we're already having those conversations with them. And the other thing that we're also doing is having the meetings with, again, the executive team and getting into the granular details of what does Olympia need, and how are we going to work at the Capitol next session to make sure that we're advocating for those things. And the work in the interim is just essential to all of that. So it's preparing with the clients and with the city and folks that work with the city, but then also making sure our legislators know where our priorities are going to be and working with them so that they're not caught off guard. Because the worst thing to do is have a legislator caught off guard by something.
Especially our local
that
delegation.
that you're asking for. It happens because you can't always, emergencies come up and things happen, but if we can be as prepared as we can be, the more success we'll have with them.
And I've heard you talk with us too about, how important the storytelling piece is. And so I think for us, we've been thinking about how do we point to some examples of where funding has worked really well, where we've maybe set an example for other communities. I know Jay and other staff contribute to the bill development process of like, well, what would this work? Does this not work? So I think those relationships become really important, I would imagine, like during the in-between.
Yeah. And of course, and I keep saying this, of course, with your local delegation, but that's where you guys have done some incredibly innovative stuff around housing. And so how are we going to make sure the housing chair in the House and the vice chair in the House and obviously Senator Bateman, for her colleagues on the housing committee in the Senate, make sure that they know what you all have done and make sure we're showing them that there are these opportunities for cities to do, and this is a success you have. And what did you learn? I mean, I'm sure there were hurdles you had to get around, and there were things that worked and things that didn't work. And making sure to share those insights as well, I think is really critical.
Yeah.
There seems to be just a general perception right now that it can be difficult to work between two political parties. And that they often are just at odds with each other.
Yeah.
What's been your experience in advocating and working to find common ground, on behalf of the issues that are so important to cities like us?
We've talked about storytelling a lot today, and that continues to be an effective way to communicate with legislators. The community needs are where they tend to find the most balance. So when you go in and talk about my community needs this because of A, B, C, and D, that's where you're going to be able to see both Republicans and Democrats say, okay, we need to figure this out. Their paths getting there might be different, right? But if you make community kind of the heart of the issue, both parties care about their communities. Both parties want to do the best for their communities and where they live and who they serve. And that's where you can find the common ground. So I see this a lot in capital funding. It's a very easy thing for folks to find agreement on, but you have rural communities having to go in and talk to urban legislators and say, this is what we need and here's why we need it. And they might be on completely different political spectrums from each other, but they're all going to agree, okay, we can't leave that community out. So we've got to figure out how to solve for these problems. And so I think there's a lot of, I think both parties genuinely care about the betterment of Washington, and that's where you find a lot of commonality.
Sure.
And I think it's back to the communities that everybody serves and making sure that those are the stories that you focus on.
I think there's just so much truth to that. I mean,
Yeah.
all of them are doing the work because
Yeah.
they want to make a difference and
Yeah.
make life better for people that live here.
Yeah.
And you're right. They may have a different way for how they might go
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But, for us, I find that just be honest,
Yeah.
be straightforward, and be direct about what we need.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Right.
and then be open to different pathways to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where the best common ground is
Yeah.
found, I think, in all this work.
Yeah. And be willing to negotiate too.
And be willing to negotiate.
As long as it gets to your end goal, like
Yeah.
both give a little and
Yeah.
it ends up being great. So
I appreciate that.
yeah.
Well, let's start moving into 2027 here. So before we start talking about issues, let's talk about kind of dynamics.
Yeah.
There's some open seats. Some folks are retiring, and we got some elections coming.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some changing faces at the legislature as we move into 2027. So just talk a little bit about the changing dynamics as from your perspective as we head into this session.
Yeah. We have probably a little over a dozen folks that have announced their retirements. And so they will have new folks coming in. A lot of sort of long-time serving legislators. Senator Warnock has served in the legislature for I don't know how many years. And she announced her retirement at the end of last session. Representative Theringer has been there for a long time. He announced his retirement at the end of last session as well. So a lot of folks who are long-standing legislators who have a lot of historical knowledge too are announcing their retirement. So we'll see how those dynamics all play out. There are also quite a few tough seats, different races that are being ran, and we'll see how those play out as well. And then how those changes impact the legislature and the priorities of the legislature. I will say it's good to get new voices in and new thoughts and ideas, but it's also sometimes hard to lose the historical knowledge.
It sure is.
Of what has happened and what worked and what didn't work, and how some of those, just that knowledge base, to lose some of that is difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's start talking about issues. So, you've had a chance to talk to the executive team. You've had
Yep.
a chance to talk to the council. What's starting to take shape for Olympia for the 2027 session? We talked about some of it along the way, but
Some of it, yeah. I think we're going to continue to focus on our legislative priorities. So housing and homelessness will always be top of mind for the city. revenue sources will be top of mind for the city. I think to your point, the legislature allows for cities to increase sales taxes or property taxes or what have you. I guess not property taxes, but sales taxes. And that's great, but it's also a regressive tax that ultimately comes down to your taxpayers, and that's hard. That's
Yeah.
hard on the folks' bottom line. So new revenue, I would also say looking at different funding opportunities. Obviously, the estuary will be top of mind going into next session as a budget year, so we'll be able to see how much funding we're able to get there in the capital. And then transportation budget, although the news over the weekend was it's going to be tight.
I saw that.
So we'll have to talk about that. But looking at some opportunities in the transportation budget as well.
Yeah, Capital Way being a big one. I know
Yep.
we have a lot in our community that are interested in kind of the future of Capital Way, and
Yeah.
there is a project there that's going to happen in the out years,
Yep.
and depending on some transportation funding that we'll seek, will determine how quickly we can get that project
Yeah.
built. But it's a
Yep.
high priority for us
Yeah.
on the capital side.
Definitely. And I think we're also exploring some potential policy legislative changes around some eviction reform work
Yep.
And some other areas. So that'll be something else that we explore deeper with our 22nd LD and see what might be possible.
Yeah, on the homelessness side of things, right? So I want to say this, particularly for Senator Bateman, who's done such amazing
Yeah.
work on affordable housing.
Yep.
Right, missing middle housing and just affordable housing, and trying to make housing attainable
Yep.
and more affordable in our community. So just a lot of amazing work that's been done there.
Yeah.
Yet we are still have a high number of folks that are homelessness that are really not close to attaining even affordable housing at this moment in
Yeah.
time and need to be stabilized. And
Yeah.
I think we're at crisis levels, and I just think this has to at some point become a higher priority for the state.
Yeah.
There's a lot of burden on the cities right now to take on this work, and we are just at capacity.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in, I think the council is too, in just a changing conversation this year, and to be more direct maybe about what's really needed to resolve those that are in homelessness right now.
Yeah. And I think another part of that too is the governor put together the task force on the new Department of Housing and
Yep.
how is that going and how is that taking shape and is that going to come to fruition and
What's
if
it going to look like?
What does it look like? And if it does that get the state more involved in areas where they haven't been able to?
Yeah.
So I think that's another part of the conversation. That's a dynamic, if
Yeah.
you will.
And we'll continue to work on revenue alternatives that are the least regressive.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really hard, I think, in kind of the mix of things that we work on with the state. There are just so many options. And, I think what I hear from my electeds a lot is to give cities back some more local control over some things and let us make some decisions around what our communities might be okay with, right, in terms of whether they be fees or taxes or whatever they are. And so we'll continue to work that issue here because it's still a big issue for us. We're also going to have another tough budget year for the state of Olympia.
Yep.
The expenses just don't keep pace with revenues, and so that's always going to be kind of where we are.
Yep.
And so we're going to have to continue to work at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Olympia and a lot of cities across the state.
Just about all of my peers, every one of them I
facing-
talk to, are facing the same thing.
And it's tough as the state passes progressive revenue, and that's great. It is tough. Then what do localities do in the meantime as we're waiting for that revenue to build up, and then hopefully we are able to get some funding from it. But until then, we're in this influx, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which makes it tough.
Well, I look forward to getting our meeting started. I did have coffee with Rep. Parsley last week, so
She's great.
I picked her brain a little bit on some things. So
Perfect.
I'm looking forward to meeting with the others here soon. I know you're working to get those set up, and Stacey and I will join you, and we'll have some honest conversation, and then figure out where we are, and we'll start pulling an agenda together more formally.
Yeah. It's the right time to do it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then we can start to build out, love our 22nd LD, but who else do we need to meet with?
Who else do we need to meet with?
Yep.
Right.
And figuring out what rooms we need to be in and who else we need to talk to and what connections we need to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to add too, Kyla, I've heard you talk about this. You mentioned it a little bit earlier about sometimes the change happens incrementally. And so sometimes the first year it's starting a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second year it might develop to a concept, right?
Yeah.
So I think I've heard you say consistency, building relationships, telling stories, it's key, and it's key to continue to do that year over year.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a large policy change could start just from a study. And
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
says, oh, a study is a little bit like taking like sort of passing the buck, like kicking the can down the road. They're going to
Delaying the conversation.
Yeah, they're
Right.
just going to do a study. But that study will show something. And from that, they'll have to do something. And so, well, the study doesn't sound that exciting. It's one of the first steps that happens into big policy changes.
Yeah.
And might be a little thing, but it's the incremental change that drives people nuts. but it's imperative.
It's imperative.
And it's progress, and we
It's
celebrate
progress.
that.
Exactly.
And we talk about pace of government, and I know that's hard,
Yeah.
right? And government, the wheels of government certainly turn slow sometimes, but at the end of the day, the pace of things sometimes is what makes sure the right thing gets done.
Yeah.
Right, and it
Yeah.
gets done in the way that we want it to. I mean, I've always said, if you do it fast versus doing it right, then we just create more problems when we go too fast. So that's hard, but
It's hard, but it's also a part of advocacy, right? If you
It
want your
is.
voice at the table, it is going to take longer for the legislature or anybody to listen to everybody who comes in and says, "Hey, I want to add my 2 cents in here."
Yeah.
And if they're going to do it right, then they should be listening to people, and
Right.
you should be advocating. So
well, really appreciate your time and your
Yeah,
perspective,
thank
and
you.
we've just really enjoyed having you as our lobbyist team.
us too. You guys have been fun.
Yeah,
been
and
fun.
you've already brought some innovation to us, and so we look forward to more of that and more conversation, and then we'll keep working it. But as we close out, just anything else that you want to add to the conversation?
No, I think we're doing some really good work, and we're having a lot of conversations and meeting with new folks, and I think that's been great. We did our first ever lobby day.
Yes, we
didn't even
did.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
That
We
was
did.
great. But really trying to get the city in front of more people and make sure that we're telling the city of Olympia's story and more about their work and making sure legislators know
Okay.
what's going on. So
Well, Kyla, Stacey, thank you so much for the conversation.
thank you.
And Stacey, I think you're going to close us out.
I am. Yeah. Thank you again, Kyla.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for listening. So you can find us everywhere you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We have a video version at olytv3.com, and you can always download our Oly TV app. It's really good. If you want to send us questions, you can at olytv@ci.olympia.wa.us. And don't forget to stay informed by subscribing to our e-news at our website, olympiawa.gov/subscribe, and follow us on our socials.
Yeah, we need those clicks. We need those likes. If you know where to find podcasts, you know where to find us. So we'll see you next time.